Day 187.
It's almost beyond belief what has happened. Despite my trust and faith in her, Jelen attempted a coup this morning. Now that it is all over, and she and her fellow conspirators are dead, we've begun to piece together what has happened. Jelen, it seems, took umbrage when the virus killed off her family almost in its entirety. She felt that I was responsible for their murders, and had joined some radical group planning to oust me and to restore the old order. I can't believe that anyone as intelligent as she was could be so utterly foolish as to want back those foolish counselors. Still, it seems that Pandak and his ilk are a focus for those who do not like my regime. Gimel suggested that it might be better if they were eliminated, but I hesitate to do this. Such a move would suggest that we are afraid of what Pandak and the rest could do, and would be a show of weakness. I favor simply having their contacts watched. Any future conspirators should thus be simple to spot. Still, Jelen planned well, and was actually equipping her men with portable force fields to enable them to storm the Panopticon and attempt to assassinate me. She had based the shields on the sash of Rassilon I had designed, though, and that was her mistake. I know the weakness of the device, and when Gimel woke me with the news of the revolt, I was soon able to stop it. Gimel's men could not affect the attacking maniacs, but I could. It was simply a matter of sending a signal that caused the field to contract about each of the wearers. Those that weren't crushed to death were suffocated. Jelen was one of the latter, and I only wish that her death had been more protracted. Such disgusting ingratitude as she showed deserved a far lengthier and more painful demise. Still, that abortive little revolt shows that there are still some who can plot against me, and that they can find some people to take a stand and back them up. It's really quite astonishing, and inevitably foolish. I've allowed Gimel to recruit more agents, and to position them as he deems best.
Day 203.
We are now ready to begin. It's hard to believe, but for the first time in many months I will be leaving not only the Citadel, but also Gallifrey for a short time. Omega is getting more and more excited as the hour approaches for the fleet to take off. He and I have the smallest craft, and the other 8 ships will remain almost a light year from Polyphylos. They will monitor everything that happens, and check that all is going according to plan. Curious. Had it not been for the stranger, I would probably be in as nervous and excitable a state as Omega is right now. After all, there is a chance that our tampering with Polyphylos might not power the Eye of Harmony, but instead utterly destroy Gallifrey. But I am now certain that this will not happen. Now, I will simply wait, knowing that we shall succeed. In 2 days, Gallifrey will be completely in control of the boundaries of time and space, and Omega will be dead.
Day 204.
We are now in orbit about Polyphylos. As I write, light from the doomed star illuminates my ship. Hanging here in orbit, it's hard to conceive that tomorrow this entire yellow sun will be no more. Once the forces of the Hand of Omega squeeze it, and the Eye of Harmony locks onto it, then it will explode in a single, intense instant of brightness, and then appear to vanish forever from the universe. It will be locked within my power. All is now ready, and I have insisted that everyone in the fleet gets a good night's rest. We do not want any mistakes tomorrow. I know, of course, that we shall succeed, but there is always that little core of doubt within each of us that cries out in fear. I have consulted with Gimel in great secrecy. He reports that his men have killed or arrested all of Omega's fellow plotters. What is most ironic is that they had planned to strike against me right after the detonation of Polyphylos. Had Gimel not moved before then, they might even have won. And then control over all time and space would have been theirs, and not. The stranger is really most irritating. He interrupted my line of thought, arriving on my ship at the most inopportune moment. I find myself torn between anger and admiration for him. Despite all that I could do to prevent it, he managed to land his TT capsule on my ship. Clearly, the Time Lords that I shall create will be a most powerful race. And you almost have to admire his gall in daring to arrive just hours before my greatest triumph. I only wish that I could say the same about the asinine speech he came to deliver. He still has this fanatical determination to try to make me see what he likes to think of as sense. I prefer other words for the liberal drivel that he spouts. I gather he's had something of a strong falling out with the Time Lords of his own era, and now wishes to get his own back at them by erasing them from history. Oh, he never said it in quite those words, of course. Instead, he hides behind a mealy-mouthed rationalization that they have become a stagnant society, introverted and impotent. Clearly, he is interpreting this in his own way. I believe the truth of the matter is that they are a stable, well-ordered society, and that they do not change because they have achieved perfection. When I interrupted his rambling arguments with the accusation that he is simply trying to get back at the regime that has wronged him, he looked at me crestfallen. I challenged him to deny that he has been disciplined by them, and his weak defense was that he has been subjected to their whims many, many times. It is as I suspected all along. The stranger is either dangerously insane, or criminal. Oh, not a common one, I grant you, but nonetheless a felon. Still, he doesn't lack courage, only intelligence. Perceiving that he was not winning the argument with me, he did finally give up in disgust. Logic isn't one of his better qualities.
I don't want to prevent your work, he wheedled. Simply to give it a nudge in a different direction.
I'm glad to hear that, I said dryly. He gave me one of his long stares.
Don't think that the idea doesn't tempt me, was his reply. You've murdered and enslaved millions of people to get to this point. But the Time Lords are necessary for the future of the universe, and you are the key to their creation.
I tried one last time. To be able to get to this nexus, I have had no option but to act as I must. Don't think that I enjoy killing anyone. But to achieve stability, those who dig at its roots must be disposed of. I do not kill out of enjoyment, but from necessity. As for enslaving Gallifrey, I think you'll discover that there is less crime, less poverty, and less inequity than ever before.
And less freedom,
he retorted. Freedom is such an empty word. Freedom to do what? Left to their own devices and imagination, most people waste their lives. Instead, I have given them a purpose, the elevation of Gallifrey to the strongest power in all of time and space. They've been handed a destiny that changes the entire course of history. Are a few lives and the loss of a few freedoms so important that this destiny should be ignored?
People have a right to choose the destiny that they want for themselves.
Ah, you and Omega would probably get along well. You too believe in the outmoded concept of democracy. Let the people decide. I shook my head. The people, left to their own devices, will never decide. And if they do, who is to say that they will make the right choice? Democracy is a foolish system of government.
Perhaps so, he conceded. But it's better than any other. Tyranny, for example.
Come, am I such a tyrant? I asked. What I do for Gallifrey. If I am a tyrant, then it is with the best of intentions.
You're handing to the Time Lords such power as would corrupt a saint, Rassilon, he responded. Even if you are the most pure-hearted tyrant that the universe has ever known, you cannot guarantee that the same will hold true forever.
Perhaps not, I had to agree. But I will do my best to ensure that no tyranny will come from the powers that I endow upon the future members of our race. But I cannot agree with your apocalyptic vision of the future. Make your decision. Go, or stay and watch my new creation. Eventually he left, of course. Not without more and longer speeches, but he finally understood that I stand firm in my resolve. I have not made my choices lightly, and I am not going to change them now. Out of respect for his audacity, I will place safeguards on my spiritual descendants, though. Tyranny of the worst kind can never be tolerated. only strong rule and a resolute purpose. I think that the first law of time I shall lay down, though, will be that no Time Lord shall ever travel into his or Gallifrey's own past. The stranger is bad enough with his constant harping on his tired ethics, but suppose that there will come a fanatic one day with similar ideas, but a will to do something positive, such as returning to kill me. No, that can never be allowed.
Day 205.
It is accomplished. We are no longer Gallifreyans, but the Lords of Time. As I sit now within my offices in the Citadel, the hum of power surrounds me. The time control room is awash with chronons, and the TT capsules are being prepared for their first real tests. Everything has gone as I desired it. My only partial regret is that I was forced to kill Omega. He would so dearly have loved to be here to see this. I managed a few brief hours of sleep, and then awoke to the day of my greatest triumph. Omega and I set the sashes firmly about us, and I followed his craft into the blazing glory of Polyphylos. There we held our positions, and when the exact moment came, he sent the hand of Omega spiraling into the heart of the star. It was a moment of indescribable beauty. The entire body of the star shook, and ripples of force sped across it. Then, in a brief, burning instant, came the explosion. Without the protection that the sash afforded me, I should have been annihilated by the flow of radiation that exploded from the dying core. At the very second that the shields moved to their maximum, closing out the indescribable light that poured from the wreckage of Polyphylos, I used my remote control to shut down Omega's sash. His craft disappeared, eradicated in an instant. I am not a harsh man, and I am glad that Omega could never have known what happened to him. His body must have been torn apart in a microsecond by the terrible forces that we have unleashed here today. Back on Gallifrey, the Eye of Harmony captured and chained that outpouring of chronons. The TT circuits within my ship leaped to life, and both I and the fleet were able to leap back to the Citadel in a second. Such a feeling of true exhilaration, to know that the power was finally ours. Naturally, I made a speech. The public access videos spread my words across the entire planet as I broke the news about the tremendous accomplishment that Omega and I had made possible. The boundaries of time and space have been destroyed, I proclaimed. No longer are we mere Gallifreyans. From this instant on, we are the Lords of Time. I also broke the news of the unfortunate death of Omega to them. I invented a story that his force field had failed at the second of explosion, and that sadly he'd been destroyed. It would never do for the people to know that he was a traitor, plotting my overthrow. The public has a need of heroes, and dead heroes are so much more convenient than live ones. They are much less likely to stand up and say something to embarrass you, and you can mold them into whatever shape you chose. This is the moment of greatest triumph for both myself and for Gallifrey. A new era has begun.
Day 20,000.
I found the old diary that I used to keep the other morning, and read through it. Much of it seems as fresh to my memory as it did then. Some of it I find hard to recall, even on rereading the words, and much has changed since I wrote them. In the years that have gone by, we Time Lords have consolidated our powers. I have been able to make changes, and there is now a High Council serving me. Naturally, their first move was to elect me president for life. I like a pliable council. The Panopticon has been opened up. and the representatives from the various chapters are now able to take their seats there and debate on state occasions. The only rule that I have imposed on those holding political powers is that they must be of the new Gallifreyan breed. They must possess the virus that allows them to regenerate. The stranger, were he here now, would undoubtedly scream in panic, claiming that I have created an elite. Well, he would, I suppose, be correct. We Time Lords are the elite of Gallifrey. Still, given that we have abilities far beyond those of the average person, is it not logical that it should be so? After all, there are thousands of times more insects on Gallifrey than there are people. Should we then be required to hand over the planet to their rule? Absurd, of course, as is the notion that the Gallifreyans should be allowed to have a say in the running of time. As with all things, change has brought us many problems. I have been more than busy these last few years simply formulating and imposing the regulations that will govern time travel. As I see I had noted down, I have laid down the first law that no Time Lord shall ever cross his or her own timelines. I want no revisions of history at this stage. There has been only one real regret for me since I stopped my diary, and that is the death of Gimel. It is still a hard blow to take, knowing that the one person I had trusted above all should have been planning my overthrow almost from the beginning. However, he did seriously underestimate me, assuming that I had allowed him to set up his little net of spies unsupervised. My own agents within his little clique gave me timely warnings of his intentions. His miniature revolution was nipped in the bud, and he was able to perform one last task for our race by dying. It's odd, but before his conspiracy, it had never occurred to me that it might become necessary to one day execute a Time Lord. It took a little imagination on our part to accomplish it, of course. After all, the usual staser shot to the head would hardly work, giving Gimel's powers of regeneration. Instead, one of my aides came up with the concept of vaporization. When we tried it, it worked beautifully. Every single particle in the victim's body it disassembled and scattered into the vortex of time and space. There is no chance at all of bodily regeneration. I have now had it written into the codes that any Time Lords that must be executed should be disposed of in this manner. It is sad, though, that Gimel's death should have become so inevitable. Thremix, Omega, Jelen, all of the people who began this grand design with me are now dead. And our foes, too, Pandak and Maeron. I sometimes wonder why death is always such a prelude to change, but it seems to inevitably be so. Well, for now, this is enough. I believe that my diary is complete, and I shall seal it, and the secrets it contains, away. Perhaps someday it will be recovered and read, perhaps not. It hardly seems to matter. Still, I do not wish to finish this narrative on a depressing note, and should perhaps explain why I no longer need to keep this written record. One of the brighter of the younger Time Lords has invented what he calls an excitonic circuit. It appears to be basically a net of artificial brain cells that constantly update the information that they carry. He tells me that this amplified panatropic net of his would be able to record the mental processes and thoughts of any person. I can see that it will have many uses, perhaps even more than now seems possible. But from this point on, I shall certainly use it to store information that before I have only dared to write down. Again, I find my memory returning to that impudent interloper. His prediction that the Time Lords would become brooding, introspective failures seems to be no more than his own dissatisfaction written onto the whole race. The Time Lords are a bright, alert species, and we are constantly expanding our horizons. Already we have conquered the boundaries of time and space. We have shaken the grim hold that death has always held over us. We can now record emotions, thoughts, and memories forever. All this in so short a period of time. Given the vast frontiers that are now open to us, who can say what the Time Lords may not someday be able to accomplish?
Final entry.
Rassilon is now finished, and it has fallen to my task either to seal or to destroy all of his records. Accordingly, I have searched through his offices and come upon this box of scrolls. It has apparently lain here for many centuries, all but forgotten even by Rassilon himself. I sat, quite engrossed, in reading his accounts of the formation of the society we now have. He has ruled a long time, almost 1,000 years, and much has happened since he wrote. Still, it is not my place to attempt to chronicle those events. I am simply ending his narrative with a few notes on what has happened to him. Then these scrolls should be sealed. I will recommend that they never be opened. Already, in just a few years, Rassilon has become something of a legend among the common people of Gallifrey. How quickly the general populace seems to forget his darker side. But perhaps that is to the good. As Rassilon himself remarked, heroes are often needed, and dead heroes are the best of all. Not that he is dead exactly. I had voted for termination, but the General Assembly overruled this. Partly this was due to a fear that Rassilon had somehow set a trap in the vaporization booth that would not kill him, but simply transport him somewhere. It's hard to argue with this opinion. After all, he was an accomplished engineer and possessed a feverishly devious mind. The other part of the reluctance to kill him stemmed from the fact that the new regime did not wish to begin as Rassilon himself had, with executions and repressions. In the end, they elected merely for eternal imprisonment. He was taken and confined by force screens, ones he did not himself design, within the dark tower at the heart of the Forbidden Zone. His body would remain immobile as long as the screens last, which will be while the Eye of Harmony can drain any power at all from the outer cosmos. If Rassilon does ever waken, then it will be as the ruler of a dead and barren world. Curiously, he did not seem at all dismayed by the sentence imposed upon him. He looked upon it as a step into immortality. Reading back through the records he has left, I am forced to wonder how honest his thoughts contained in these scrolls have been. Is he merely another Time Lord, perhaps the greatest of us, but still similar? Or did Threemix design a second, better virus for his own use? The original virus, Rassilon notes, would have killed Threemix. I find myself wondering if the brilliant biologist then worked on a second strain, one that might have granted him full immortality. And with Threemix dead, did Rassilon then appropriate this virus for his own use? Such speculations are fruitless. Rassilon will never again talk. I am almost certain that it is merely my own fear speaking in the night to me. But there are hints within Rassilon's records that he is not the same kind of being as we are. His earlier writings, for example, show his worries about selecting a successor to himself. Towards the end, this thought has vanished. Is this simply because he felt he had a longer time in which to make his decision? Or did he believe himself to be truly immortal, and thus in no need at all to determine his successor? Anyway, I have spoken to no one of my worries. It would surely do no good at all to share these fears, and I will have these scrolls sealed away. Perhaps, if I were a braver person, I would simply burn them, but they contain such valuable material that I find myself hesitating. One day, perhaps, a wiser, kinder society may evolve, and the truths locked within these scrolls, along with the distortions of that truth that infects all that Rassilon writes, may be made known. Enough. I have finished, and to this final page, I fix my seal. Pandak III.
Under this entry, one final word has been written. The handwriting, of a much later date, belongs to ex-President Borizer. It reads, simply,
Interesting.